I'm gonna go pick up my kids from school.
You
Um,
don't need to sound so excited about it.
it's Friday, man.
Hello, and welcome to the Inciting Event, a brand new podcast created entirely out of my self-serving need to be entertained by the people that I want to chat with. I am your host, Zachary Steele. In addition to being the founder and executive director of Broadleaf Writers Association, I'm also the author of 4 novels, including Perfectly Normal, which hits the shelves July 18th. Now, on this podcast, we'll take an entertaining dive into moments our guests decided on their creative paths. Along the way, we'll talk movies, music, books, games, passion projects, revisit past projects our guests would now do differently or characters they'd wish they'd focused more upon, and even engage, if I can get them to, in some freestyle storytelling. Now, it's more than just an interview. The Inciting Event is meant to showcase creatives in a fun and informative way to give you more reason to follow them and enjoy their work. On today's show, I am joined by author and storyteller Clay McLeod Chapman. In addition to, well, let's just say a lot of novels and publishing credits, because I'm a writer, not a mathematician, Clay is the author of the forthcoming novel, What Kind of Mother, which is due out September 12th. In addition, Clay is also the co-writer of the Quiet Part Loud podcast, which is produced by Jordan Peele, Monkey Paw Productions, and Gimlet Media, and co-written with Mac Rogers. Now, you can find out more about Clay at claymcleodchapman.com, which I encourage, but you can also stay right here and find out as much as we can figure out about Clay now. So let's get to it. Clay McLeod Chapman, sir.
Hey.
Welcome to this thing I call a podcast.
Oh my God. It's amazing. You know what? You were the first person to say author of What Kind of Mother. And it's just wild because I mean that book doesn't come out till September. And I just don't know how to feel yet. Something new comes into the world and there's that weirdness of like, what is it? And I
You
actually
just
have
got the pregnancy test.
pretty much. Like it is maybe I'm at like sonogram stage,
Sonogram
there's
stage.
like, the ultrasound where it's like
A
you're
little,
looking at it and you're
a
like,
little jelly,
what is that thing?
just a little jelly on the belly. Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
no, it's awesome. I totally understand. It's like it's such a long process. How long did you work on this one before this moment? Like when did this book start?
I totally get my dates wrong, but so I started it. I was developing it, pitching it, kind of doing the kind of like story outlining architecture with my editor back in like maybe November, like October, November, December of not last year, but the year before that, which would be, what was that
21?
year?
I think
$2021.
they tell us it was 2021. We're not sure yet.
That's
It
I'm
was
gonna stick
2020.
to it.
It was 2020 part two, I think. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so and then like by I think January we did the kind of like, you've got the green light, now go write. And 2022 was the year of writing that book. And yeah, it's still fresh, like fresh to the extent that I can't I can't articulate what it is, because
Yeah.
I'm one of those asinine people who need someone else to kind of say it first or say it to me, and then I
Hmm.
filter. I'm a filterer. Like
Hmm.
I'm a baleen kind of guy, where like I just need like all the like shrimp to go through my beard, and like at a certain point I'll be like, okay, this is sustenance, this is what it is, this makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I need the
Do I
world
get
to tell me
so?
what I did.
So I'm that person?
You are
Like
that person. I mean,
I
like
just made this real for you.
you're my first shrimp. You made it into the mouth.
Awesome. Great. I always want to be your first shrimp. You know that, right?
any chance that you can be my first shrimp, I will gladly take.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm fascinated for this story because one, I've always had an interest in tarot cards, and I noticed that's actually part of it. Not that I've read any of it yet because we're way too far out for that. But before we move on to other things, I am curious, like what did you know about tarot cards beforehand, and what did you have to learn?
A lot. I had to learn a lot. And you know, the whether or not this is what the book is actually about anymore, for me, going into the writing of the book, like the kind of general pitch was, I wanted one of those kind of those storefront psychics, palm readers, tarot card readers, someone who read like a fortune teller, who, you know, depending on where your own kind of belief systems are, like maybe they're real, maybe they aren't. But if we're coming from a default of that palm readings or fortune tellings or psychics are not real, that the people who kind of you know, that this is their job, this is their livelihood, like what if one of those people actually does have a psychic slash supernatural moment?
Yeah.
Someone who isn't psychically inclined suddenly is psychically inclined. Someone who doesn't dabble in the supernatural for real does have a super, like that kind of what if, to me, was the kind of core concept of the book.
Yeah.
Then I had to learn about it. I have
That's
like
awesome.
a whole stack of books of just like, you know, palm reading 101, or, you know, tarots for dummies. And luckily I don't dwell in that world for long. And thankfully my editor was shrewd enough to kind of trim back my my
Mhm.
research. Um, so yeah,
The
yeah.
the value of editors. Yeah, I think that the old saying, you know, write what you know, is a wonderful thing to tell writers if they want to write one book.
Mhm.
But if you want to write more books, writing is constant research. So that's why I
Yeah.
was kind of curious. As like I know that, you know, you've kind of woven in and out of the horror genre for a few projects. But you also land a lot on occult and things of those natures. And I was just curious if over the course of time you had accumulated that knowledge, or if that was something new that you had to learn.
No, I mean,
But
like,
yeah.
I mean, every book, you know, you start every book and it's like classes in session. Like
Mhm.
you're here to kind of learn, you know, you have to learn more than what actually goes in the book. So like I'm just constantly reading, like I'm researching, you know, but I enjoy reading about that stuff, learning about that stuff. I'm terrible at parties because I'm the guy who, you know, corners you and is like, you know, have you heard about, you know, like back in 1973, there was this one psychic who, you know, and but I just love
Uh,
that. Like it gives me an excuse to kind of imbibe history or facts and, you know, things that I might not otherwise have the opportunity or the time to kind of indulge.
yeah, no, I get it. I get it. Well, speaking of the writing journey, you know, in terms of what you've written, like one of the things that's so important in storytelling, as you know, is the inciting event, which, for those who are not familiar with the phrase, is the point in which the character has something happen to them, around them, that turns the world upside down. Think the letters arriving to Harry, you know, to turn his world upside down from being the boy under the stairs to a kid learning to be a wizard at a school. I want to use that as a platform here to try to find the inciting event for your path. And so, for you as a writer, as a performer, as a storyteller, what is your origin story? When was the moment that your world got turned upside down and you suddenly wanted to be on this path?
Oh man. I mean, it's a tough question because I feel like, you know, if you're lucky, you'll have 5 inciting incidents, you know, or a sequence of incidents that, like, you know, one kind of led to the next, led to the next, led to the next. And I don't know, I mean, like, this is maybe a little silly of me, but I feel like I've had probably three careers as a writer, and fail, like, you know, I have a career and I fail at that one, and then I have another career and I fail at that one, and like I think I'm on like my third life cycle as a writer, of, you know, of having that inciting incident, having the career, losing the career, licking wounds, and kind of healing back into the next phase, you know, evolutionary step of my career. Which I guess is to say it's all about stamina and, you know, the long game. But if we're going to stick to the rules of like what is the inciting incident, I mean, like the kind of story I always tell is that I was a crappy student. I was terrible as a kid, you know, like as early as 5th grade. And I grew up in Virginia, and you know, I was just one of these students that, like, if there was a window, like my attention just totally went out it. And you know, whatever was happening in the class just could not hold my attention. And it took it took my 6th grade English teacher to kind of pull me aside one day and say, "You are failing my class. You will be repeating my class next year when you repeat the 6th grade once more, if you don't do something to, you know, engage and kind of hike up your grade." And Virginia was great because they have this statewide playwriting competition. At that point, it was called, oh my God, the Young Writers for the Theater. Though I think it's something else now, New Voices for the Theater. And it, you know, it was a statewide playwriting contest. And my teacher said, if you enter this competition, I'll give you some extra credit. And I wrote, you know, 3 of the most craptacular plays you've ever read, but I got the extra credit and I passed. But then I get this letter in the mail like a month later saying, "Congratulations, you've been selected as one of the, you know, one of 30, you know, students from around the state to like come to the local university and work on your plays with, you know, professionals." And it, you know, honestly, like it changed my life, because all of a sudden I found this thing that I really wanted to do. I love telling stories. And at that point it was telling stories for the stage. And that evolved kind of over the years into other kind of formats, other mediums. But if it weren't for that English teacher, if it wasn't for Susan B. Royer, my 6th grade English teacher, you know, I have no idea where I would be right now. Probably not on this podcast.
Well, I have Susan to thank, because I've certainly enjoyed knowing you for as long as I have, and if I hadn't had that opportunity, I would have definitely been missing out. So thanks, Susan. Yeah, well, unlike you, I guess no, actually, very much like you, but you said that you know, that you had trouble at school and everything, and I made straight A's in 5th grade, and that was my peak. And it kind of went downhill from there because of the same issue, is that I floated, you know, my head was somewhere else, thinking of stories, doing all kinds of stuff that wasn't in the moment. So I can totally relate to that. I feel like that might actually be a very common story amongst creatives.
Yeah. Well, you got to be the catcher in the rye. You got to be that one person that, like, I think of the teacher who looks out at the sea of, you know, faces, you know, staring back. And maybe there are those students who are not engaged, or not kind of latching in to the lesson plan. But there's something there, and, you know, it doesn't happen for everyone. It doesn't happen for every student. It doesn't, you know, not every teacher takes on that mantle. But like, I feel like if they can see the potential, if they can see there's something more going on there than what this kind of, you know, this format offers, and you just have to kind of redirect, or, you know, find, rather than cramming the circular peg in a square hole, like find the circular hole, you know, which is, it's, you know, sometimes the world doesn't kind of offer that to you, but if one person can just push you or nudge you or redirect you, you know, that makes all the difference.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I actually had a sixth grade teacher that strangely enough was in math that kind of nudged me in the writing area, and I wrote an essay about it. Um, I actually thought at that point in my life I wanted to be a professional bowler, and I had this exchange with him when I was talking about it, where I told him that I wanted to be a professional bowler and get all of my because I wanted to have my angels right. And he said, "You meant your angles." I was like, "No, my angels." And I went on this long thing that tied religion into bowling and how there was, all of this that was going to come out of it. And he said, "Man, I don't know if you're ever going to make it as a professional bowler, but you really should give writing a try."
That's amazing. Oh my
Yeah, and I don't even remember his name. I call him Mr. Surser because I don't remember his name at all. And I'll have to try to find that someday.
oh my
But
God.
but that was
Wow.
also it was also the same class. I have two memories from that class. There's that one and the kid that vomited on my shoe and the smell of
Ooh.
sawdust that to clean it up afterwards. So those are my two memories from basically from sixth grade.
Oh my
So
God.
quite an interesting ride. Quite an interesting ride.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Um, you
Well,
you wrote the story, you wrote the essay about
I
the
did
mess.
write an essay. Yeah. I called it Bowling for Jesus.
Oh my God.
Yeah, because it was like, I don't know, at that particular point in life, my mom had this thing, and I greatly appreciate this as an adult, that she wanted us to. My mom's a very church going kind of person and Christian lady, and she wanted us to have that basis, that background. And so she made us go to church and said that, when we were 13, she would give us the option. And so, I mean, at the age of 13, I was like most 13-year-olds, I was like, no, that's okay, I'll opt out and just sleep on Sundays. But it's like it had created this sort of foundation of religion as a story. And I was fascinated by it. And I think that's where that whole thing came from. I don't think I ever said anything that made any sense as a kid. So it doesn't surprise me that in that moment I was just riffing on this whole idea of religion and bowling being this cosmic path to greatness. But anyway, there's my origin story. I'll never tell it again. Here's my origin story.
Is that essay available somewhere? Can I find that? Like,
Essay is available. I think I have it on my website, which is a very difficult one to remember. It's sacristill.com, much like yours is very difficult to remember. But yeah, I'm pretty sure I have it on there somewhere. And it showed up in a now defunct journal, so there's no site, no sense in referencing that. But yeah, Bowling for Jesus is what it's called. So
that's amazing.
yeah,
Love it. I'm gonna
but
read.
yeah. All right. Anyway, so okay, another thing that I really love is the idea of writers. We're constantly editing, we're constantly revising. I feel like the best thing that could ever happen to a writer is have a book published so that it can be taken away from them, so that they don't change anything ever again. Now that said, I'm curious, with all the work that you have specifically, um, looking in the Wayback Machine or even something recently, is there something back there that you look at and say, man, I wish knowing what I know now, I could write that thing because I would do this differently.
Absolutely. I mean, what is that the Picasso saying, like all great work, like all work is never finished, it's abandoned, like that. I mean, like I I have a pretty I give myself like 6 months, if that, maybe like 3, where whatever the patina of publishing offers, it wears off. And if I read anything of my own after that window, it's just so painful that like I'm
Mm-hmm.
just like, oh my God, like
Like
what
cringeworthy.
what was I thinking? What was the publisher thinking? My God, they let me get away with this. But you know, I I I feel kind of, this is a bittersweet story for me, but like my my first novel, which was my second book, was called Miss Corpus. And the whole experience, like I had like the kind of total Cinderella story where like my first book, which was a collection of short stories, I got a book deal like when I was really young, and I honestly didn't have a lot of the life living and the understanding of the industry, and to be honest, like the understanding of craftsmanship of like how to write a book, how to write a novel.
Mm-hmm.
So Miss Corpus, my first novel, was kind of a lesson in how not to write a novel. And I think I did everything wrong. I think I made every wrong decision along the way. And nothing, this is all me. This is not like nobody else. Like I'm not pointing any fingers or laying any blame at anyone beyond myself. Like I think I just didn't know how to write a novel. And all of a sudden I had been bestowed this amazing opportunity to write a novel. And having written nothing but short stories up to that point, lots of short stories, I knew how to write 10 pages, but anything beyond 11 pages just was like, that was uncharted territory. And how to write 200, 300, 400 pages was I had never felt so lost in all of my life, and so frankly kind of terrified of this, of writing. So when I think back to Miss Corpus, and to the publisher's credit, and my editor's credit, there was a long drawn out process. From first draft, which I turned in at like 500 pages, ultimately they published, I think it was like 234 pages was the final cut. It's so hard to kind of express the one specific, like, oh, I would change this or I would change that. But like the experience of writing that first book, if there was a way to go back and change and do it over, in a total hindsight 2020, like, well, if I knew then what I know now, the book would just be a completely different beast. And maybe not as, not everybody loves, not many people love that book. Some people do, thank God. A lot of people don't, but like, I wonder if, there's something kind of fragile and delicate about that book that, like, if I was to go back and try it again, I would probably just go raised earth and like scorched earth it, and just like, I would have to write the whole damn thing over again. But then it probably wouldn't be what it, whatever the raw kind of organicness of it would not be what it is.
Yeah, no, I understand. I think I often think of my first book, and I'm grateful that it got published, and grateful that somebody was willing to invest money in putting it in print and on the shelves and everything. And it, for a small press, it did reasonably well. But I read that thing now, and though I enjoy it, and there's a lot of humor in it, so it makes me laugh. My goodness, if I tried to attack that thing right now, it would be so incredibly different. Because I was like you, I didn't know all of the connective tissue that was necessary to write that whole book and make it, a complete story. And so I feel like there was probably some meandering and some faulty threading that was in there just to try to connect it all.
It's so funny. The book Miss Corpus is, as of February, this last February, 20 years old. That book is 20 years old. I have not cracked that book open in over 20 years. I just cannot, like, it is just such a painful experience for me. Like, I cannot. But I will say this, I know for a fact, if the book is long out of print, like, you would have, like, this is pre-digital, pre-Kindle, like, the book just does not exist other than like the third layer of some landfill in Florida right now. But I
don't know. I have a signed copy, so if anybody wants to buy that, I'll put a nice price on it.
Oh man, that doorstop is probably collecting dust by now. But I will say this, I want to say this. I know for a fact, if anyone would give me permission to hop in a time machine, I would totally change just the first line of the book. Yeah, it's so silly. And I'm blushing, but I'm gonna admit it. I'm gonna cop to it. Like the book makes no sense. The book is like, it started off with like all these multiple narratives. Like I wanted to write like a Winesburg, Ohio, or a Spoon River anthology. Like I wanted like a mosaic of narratives, of voices that would come together, and like different voices from different narrators and different characters that would come together to create a larger tapestry, a macro tapestry. My editor was just like, nope, not gonna happen. But like at one point, like in this survived the cut, but like even the book itself starts to talk. Like this, I mean, like I know this is kind of weird, but like if you think back to like when the book came out, this was like the high time of David Foster Wallace and Dave Edgar's like heartbreaking work of staggering genius. Like all the books I was reading at that point were like postmodern, like kind of like, oh, like we could do all of these wild things. And I was like, I want to do wild things. Like I want my book to talk to the reader. And for, my editor was just like, no, you're not David Foster Wallace, dude. Like you're just not, heartbreaking work of staggering genius. This book is not. But the introduction, the first chapter of the book is the friggin' book talking to the reader about what they're about to experience. And oh my God, I'm cringing and I'm stalling, but like the first sentence of the book, Miss Corpus, like Miss Lady Body, is the first line of this novel is read, for this is my body. And like, to get biblical, like just to like, it's just like, I am just mortified. And like, I've been taken to task by like reviews and, like, it's just like so pompous and so like, oh my God, like,
It's so young is what it is.
when you're 22 years old and someone's like, hey, guess what? Here's the golden ticket. You get to write a novel and we're going to publish it. And you're like, oh, wow, this is great. Like, I'm the next David Foster Wallace. Here we go. Let's get biblical. You read, for this is my body. Woohoo. Like, oh my God, it's awful.
There's two things. First of all, you said you were blushing, but I mean, not that we can tell because your beard game is strong. I'm not sure, what your daily regimen is like that, but it is strong. But also, it was like you are at your core a very gifted storyteller, and I mean, as a performer. You had your pumpkin pie show that you ran in New York for 10 years, and you still do it every once in a while, popping up and like making scores of people happy for a day. But the one thing I've always appreciated about your writing, even with a book that wants me to do communion with it, is that your narrative voice is always strong. And so like I think of the remaking, and I'm fortunate enough to have actually seen you perform essentially the opening to that, and you bring to it a really powerful connection to the reader of just somebody telling you a story. And I think that never undersell that, because that's such an important part of connecting to a reader, and you do it well. Do you want your book to conduct communion with the reader? Not really, no, but I get it.
Yeah. Oh man.
All right, we'll get you away from that. So you're not peeking into the middle school yearbook and going, oh, so awkward. But we'll go on to kind of a branch of that. Transmedia is such a thing that it's such a big thing now, and for, again, to define it, transmedia is just the idea of taking elements of a story and telling them on other platforms. You see it a lot on TikTok and YouTube Shorts, and in graphic novels, characters out of books that are turned into graphic novels, and offshoots of movies that are from a story. It's taking elements of something and broadening the world. And I'm curious, I mean, you have written books, you have written comics, you have written screenplays, you have performed your own material. And I'm of this wealth of stories that you have created. Is there are there characters? Is there a character or characters, or a place or a thing that you didn't spend a lot of time with that you look back and think, I wish I could do more with them. I would take them in this direction, kind of thing.
Wow. It's a really interesting question.
Thanks. I have at least three.
No, like it's it's funny because I feel like, for a while there, I was writing middle grade books. And there's this one, like the narrator of those books, like I had so much joy writing these books because it came from a place of just kind of pure, I don't know, just pure joy. And the narrator of those books was this student named Spencer Pendleton. And he was kind of like a little rambunctious kind of id version of me, I guess. And I always just loved, I loved writing from him. And I think I wrote 3 novels from his point of view. And I think by the end, I was definitely like, I think I've told his story. But like, I don't know, like I have a soft spot for him. And then you mentioned the remaking. I think the remaking did okay. Like I think the people who like it, and those who don't. But I always felt a kinship to, at the core of the book are these 2 characters, a mother and a daughter. And Jessica, like there's the little witch girl of Pilots Creek, Virginia, is this girl named Jessica. And she exists in the book in this kind of negative space. Like you never really see her. She's never like a part of the story, but she's always kind of haunting the story, like from the edges. And I don't think there's like a sequel in the future, but if I would always, I feel kind of like I wouldn't mind kind of thinking of what the next phase of her story might be, whether that's like 20 extra pages or like an additional kind of cameo, or who knows. But yeah, right. Jessica Ford, the little witch girl with Pilot's Knob, and Spencer Pendleton.
Cool. Now I've known you a long time, and it's always been a dream of mine to ride your coattails. I mean, that is to say, to collaborate with you. And I have this idea, and it may be terrible.
It probably will be terrible. I'm just saying.
Probably will be terrible.
For my contribution, it'll probably be terrible.
I want to see what kind of story or what story elements we can come up with in 5 minutes if we take my love of fantasy and mesh it with your love of horror. Okay. If you're game.
I'm down. I make no, all bets are off. Like there's no telling what we're coming up with, right?
I'm sticking with this could be very horrible, or this could be really great. I don't know. So I have no idea. 5 minutes is not a lot of time. But I'm just going to go ahead and start a clock, and we're going to see what we come up with.
Okay.
All right.
You're leading the charge, right? Like
I'm going to kick us. I'm going to kick us off, and then and then I just need you to chime in, because I want to take my elements of what I love about fantasy, and I'll define that right now as just kind of this sort of other world from a real world setting, a sort of crossover kind of thing, in which everything is fair game, from the creatures to magic to epic elements, iconic things, to your ability to create the completely bizarre and scary and horrific, because that's what you dwell in. And I don't know. I just want to do something with you. Maybe someday we'll have our names on a book together, but right now we're going to have 5 minutes to just talk about a story.
Let's do it.
All right. So if I were to start this, which I've started the clock, if I were to start this, I would have to say that we need an antagonist and a protagonist. So which would you prefer?
I'm gonna cheat and say antagonist and
You're going to
antagonist.
take antagonist. That's actually better because you're on the horror side of things. So you get to create something terrifying. So I always tend to like to work with younger characters working through stories, but include adults. So what we're going to have is we're going to have, let's just say, a young girl, 14, with a broken family who discovers a cave, and she's escaping something from her own family. Maybe she's just escaping the fact that she no longer has a whole family, and she's going to go into this cave, and the cave is very deep, very long, and at the back end of the cave, she discovers some type of mirror embedded in a rock. A very weird thing to find at the end. And when she looks in it, she sees the cave continue, but she does not see her own reflection. And so her journey is going to be through that mirror into a world that is what?
Oh, wow. Okay. So, all right, here we go. What the girl doesn't realize is that if you cross through the mirror, into the mirror, enter the mirror, it actually, the person that like exits the other side is the worst parts of you. So it kind of strips you away from you, so that the you that enters into this mirror world, this reflective world, is no longer all you, but just the bad you, the ugly you, the angry you. And it takes, you know, the mirror itself kind of traps the good in it, so that the id is free now to kind of wreak havoc in this mirror world. And if you're not careful, you can forever stay trapped in the mirror. The good of you will be trapped in the mirror, while the bad you is free to either stay in the reflective world or break out. Like if maybe you break the mirror, that means you can kind of exist in the good world, in the regular world, our world. So there's always that risk of, you know, your reflection killing you.
That's crazy. We got 2 minutes left already. So in effect, you're kind of taking our protagonist and turning her into an antagonist, because you're doing your job. She is actually the bad version of herself, and therefore the protagonist is actually within and fighting. So perhaps we're walking into a world where dreams and reality are kind of merged, so that the protagonist within is actually having an experience, trying to at the same time escape, trying to become itself again, while the antagonist is outwardly being horrible in what is effectively not a terrible place.
What if it's a swap? It's like your bad mirror self pops out into our world, while the good like protagonist self is trapped in the reflective bad world, the mirror world, the bad world, you know,
So
underworld.
we have two worlds. We could actually do it both ways. We could either do, like, maybe walking through the mirror creates the split, and the antagonist part goes into the real world, and the protagonist part goes into the other world where it is dark, because obviously it's creating a dark version of you. And so therefore you have two stories. Therefore you could have one part of the story that is strictly fantasy and one part of the story that is almost completely horror, correct?
Yeah. The
30
mirror
seconds.
world,
30 seconds.
30 seconds. The mirror world has a lot of bad, monstery, goopy, climby, slimy, dragon, slug monsters.
Yes, and the objective is, the reason the mirror is there is because they want to actually get into our world and destroy it and take the darkness and expand. 10 seconds. Anything to add?
Happy ending.
The ending.
They swap.
She breaks the mirror from the bad side and possibly even sacrifices herself to do it. Time.
Dun dun dun.
There goes my chime. I don't know. 5 minutes isn't enough time, but I actually like that.
That was fast.
That idea of the dark mirror kind of approach to things, of like, especially if you're talking about a character who is prone to daydreaming like we were, and you see this opportunity to go into another world and you're like, I have to take this, and then you don't realize the unintended consequences. You're sending a very horrible version of yourself back home.
The dark mirror. We're just gonna call it the dark mirror.
The dark mirror. I like it. Let's do it.
Done.
I don't know. Okay, so that wasn't horrible. We'll go with that. Thank you for entertaining me. I enjoyed that.
Anytime.
So
I thought 5 minutes was gonna slog, but that went fast.
No, man, that's like 5 minutes goes by really fast. So 5 minutes isn't a lot of time. That is a lesson to be gained in this guinea pig experiment. So thank you very much. But all right, so I don't have a lot more time. You know, I want to try and keep these somewhere in that 30 to 40 minute range. Before we go, though, I'm curious about what you've seen. Okay, I know one movie you've seen recently, and I really want you to talk about it, but let's talk about movies for a second. What is something you've seen lately that makes you go, I really want to talk about this?
Oh my God, am I gonna blank on you? I'm gonna cheat. I have found Tubi. Have you heard of Tubi?
Yeah, I've heard of Tubi. Yeah.
The streaming app. It is God's gift. It is honestly the first time in a long time that I feel as if I am entering into a video store, like a VHS video rental shop. Because it feels so mom and pop, and the selection has been amazing. Like, especially like I don't know if it's tailored to me in any way, but like everything on there feels like a throwback, and you can't find them anywhere else. Like, I just recently watched for the second time in a long time this documentary called Marjo, which actually even won the Academy Award back in the 70s, like maybe 72, 73, 74. But it's all about a child evangelical preacher who he was like 8 years old when he was preaching the gospel, who's now in his like 20s, 30s. And he's kind of coming back to the circuit to expose the hypocrisy of the kind of the circuit at that point. And he invited this documentary crew to come along with him on the way through the kind of South. And it's such a phenomenal time capsule of not only the time, I mean, this was like 70s, early 70s, but also like looking at, preaching and, evangelism. It's a beautiful movie, and I can't find it anywhere else other than Tubi. So,
Wild.
Yeah.
That's interesting. No, I have discovered Tubi. I watched the Oscars, and there was like basically 5 movies that you learned about all night. And there's one that I had heard of, Marcel the Shell with Shoes.
Yeah.
With the shell with shoes on. Have you seen this yet?
I actually haven't.
Have you seen a trailer for this yet?
Yes.
Okay, because there was a moment where they showed a clip from this, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm looking at. And there's this little shell with an eyeball and shoes on, and it's on a chair, and it talks in the voice that is used, and the line that is delivered made me laugh so hard that I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to go see this. And so that's on the queue. I'm watching that this weekend. But yeah, I was actually curious about Cocaine Bear, because I know you had an experience going to see that, and I was curious what your take was on Cocaine Bear.
I mean, it's a total lark.
Well, I mean, it's not supposed to. I mean, look, I wouldn't place high expectations on it, but it was Elizabeth Banks. Is that right? Was that who? Yeah, and she did that. I mean, anything she does is like I will watch. So I was just curious.
I mean, it's fun. I think that like we put so much pressure on movies to be more, but like the kind of value of joy and entertainment. I mean, it's such a silly movie and it embraces its inherent silliness. Like it knows what it is, and it plays by its rules for the most part. Um, it's not revelatory by any stretch, but I don't think it needs to be. Um, I had a fine time. Like it.
Right.
My expectations were, like it's so funny. Like I want to articulate this in a way that's not critical of the movie, because I don't think you need to be critical of the movie. I think it's just like the kind of mechanism behind it, the machinery of it is like, I want you to have a fun, silly time. And the movie ultimately does that.
Yeah, I would place it right up there with the Sharknado class of films. I'm like, you know what you're in for, and if you'll just suspend your need for great storytelling or a fantastic movie and just have fun, then maybe you would enjoy that. So
I mean, the only kind of discrepancy there would be Sharknado. Sharknado is kind of like the budget that Sharknado has is so different than the budget that Cocaine Bear has. I think what happens is the people behind Cocaine Bear see a film like Sharknado and say, I want to do that. Let's do that in this kind of industrial machine. And is one any different than the other? Is one better than the other? Does one have the same impact as the other? It's, there's probably like 20 to 30 to 40 to 50 million dollars in between those two movies.
Oh yeah, and probably a few gaps in science as well.
Yeah. Yes.
So all right. Well, I mean, I could always talk to you forever. I don't have a desire to break, but we're going to go ahead and do that. And so, thank you for your time. And to anybody watching or listening, Clay Chapman, he's everywhere in terms of books and comics and film. He has worked with Rainn Wilson, had interviews, moderated an interview with Elijah Wood, because you've worked with him, and most recently with Wendell and Wild, forged a connection with some guys named Key and Peele or something. I don't know, never heard of him. So kudos to you for the cycles of life of your writing career, and continuing to fight and move forward and tell stories in whatever form you can. I am and always will be a fan of yours, and I want others to be as well. So keep plugging away.
Fighting the good fight, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. All right, so McLeodChapman.com. What Kind of Mother, September 12th. Pre-order. Get those pre-orders in, and hopefully be able to see you at a bookstore, or I don't know, a writing conference somewhere.
Yes.
All right, thanks.